Hey, hello everyone. This is Kirti Mutatkar, President and CEO at United Ag, and I welcome you to this episode of This is Ag, my insightful conversation with AJ Cisney, the General Manager at Rancho Guadalupe. I guarantee you that this conversation with AJ will challenge you to think and introspect on how you lead your lives and your organizations. Enjoy the episode. AJ, I have known you for 12 years now or more. I think 12, 15 years. And I feel every time that we work together on any projects or work together all these years, you've actually challenged my thinking in a certain way. And my style of leading United Ag and my style of leading my team has changed because of you. And the way you approach things from your approach to decision making and your approach to solving problems has been really inspiring for me, and I've learned from that and I've grown from that. And part of the growth at United Ag that has happened, so we've tripled in size, right? Since we've taken over 8 years ago, I attribute a lot of that to you. So AJ, can you tell me, is there a reason why the way you are, who you are? What is your story? Why is AJ, and what does he bring to the table?
Well, I appreciate you saying it and bringing it up in that context of, the success of the organization in the last, 8 years since you've been the CEO. But I would kind of cut it off right there, and I would turn it back to you because, my style doesn't work very well without the strong leader on the other side. Truth be told, I'm really not that creative. Situations that present themselves, for me personally, I need the right person on the other end of the conversation to get the outcome. Working with you has been a pleasure. And, so it's the team. It's not my style versus your style. It's, both of our style. And so I would say, in looking at that, it's important in business and in life to surround yourself, one, with people that challenge you, but also people that are like-minded. So it's not being the same, but being like-minded and willing to have the difficult discussions in a very constructive way is what it's all about.
So do you think it's the value system, right? So I think the reason you and I aligned, very different styles. I'm a very reactive person, and I very different way of leading, and you have a very thoughtful way of leading. But the reason the two of us are aligned and work very well together is our value system. And that's important when we're leading someone, understanding who we are. And as long as we're true to who we are, then it's just two different styles making that decision. Isn't that true?
Yeah, that's really all it is. I mean, that would be correct. In the last almost decade of us working together, more closely like we have, I would say that our value system is very much in alignment. So, back to, surrounding yourselves with, again, people who will challenge you, but are like-minded. I think that's important, is having a similar value system.
When you look at Rancho Guadalupe and what you do at Rancho Guadalupe, what are some of these things that you bring to the table there, and how do you can you give us an example of, because one of the things I'm doing with this show, This is Ag, is for somebody outside of agriculture, what are some of the lessons that they can take away from agriculture and tweak the way they lead, right? It's a very different industry, and we have really great leaders, and we take a very different approach because of who we are and what we do in agriculture. Can you kind of relate that back to what you do at Rancho Guadalupe?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of times people confuse leadership with you are the one that has put your stamp on something. I don't believe that to be true. I think that, at every level of management, we have to make sure that everyone has buy-in, right? And so it's absolutely not top-down leadership. It isn't bottom-up either. I think it's the bottom and the top coming together, understanding what we're trying to get done, what we're trying to accomplish.
So when looking at the COVID and when that we first had, this was March 2020 or April, May, June, when we didn't know what was happening. And I remember at that point what you did for your employees and for Rancho Guadalupe, that was, you kind of took a stand and took an innovative approach to fixing some of these things. And you saw an impact of that. You had very less cases and employees came into work, and you managed that very well. And part of that playing into was that because you had that relationship or the trust with your employees and what you did, and how did you manage all that?
That was a pretty cool program that we put together, but not one that we, went out to everyone in the company and said, look at what we're doing. We did it because we felt it was the right thing. I mean, we figured early on that it was going to be difficult to sit back and, let's say, let county government, track and trace and do all of that for our workforce. So we did it ourselves, and we managed every single case. Oftentimes we were getting phone calls from county public health, and they're asking about, this person or that person. And we said, well, this is what happened, and this is when they tested positive, and this is what we did, and they're already back to work and everything's fine. And we didn't need government to tell us how to do the right thing. For us to make sure that people were safe, that they were, if they weren't feeling well, that they were home, that they were getting compensated, that we were getting them tested, that we weren't just turning them loose. I know, not all companies handled it the same way. We felt that it was, again, the right thing, and also was going to keep more people healthy and working.
Somebody just recently asked me, what did UnitedAg learn from this COVID situation, right? One of the things I told them was it showed the importance of trust, and it showed the importance of relationships. It showed the importance of empathy, because you had to have all that with your employees. Everybody reacted very differently to this. Some people were fearful coming to work. Some people were not. So you had to really be okay with any and every scenario out there, right? And trust people that they're doing it for the right reasons, and go with that. And you saw that actually was strong from a membership standpoint, from employee standpoint. It really had an impact.
We had a situation where, the workplace changed overnight. We had to figure out how to still get the work done, but, do it in a different way. And in some cases, people working from home. And I don't think we've ever had anything happen quite in this way, to where what was going on with our employees was also happening in the community and happening to their children. And then we have these situations where now it's not just about the person who works for Rancho Guadalupe or Point Sal Packing being ill, but was their child impacted? And do they now have to stay home because their child is home and can't go to school or can't go to daycare or what have you? We've never experienced anything like this, not even anything close. And so it took a unique approach. Looking back on it, I don't know that we would have changed any of it.
Right. Even when we at UnitedAg offered the mental health benefit, we said we will offer it at zero copay, nothing going to deductible. We said we'll take on the expense, and for a year or two offer this. I remember you being very engaged in that, because the impact that this had, everything, right? Anxiety issues and mental health issues we saw across the board. This was crazy. And helping with that from an employer standpoint, you had that impact on your employees, and I'm sure they'll the loyal employees and stay true to what you do, and that comes back again as from your business standpoint. Any thoughts on that?
Well, before the pandemic, I think that there was another pandemic that was going on, is still going on, and that is the attention to mental health. I think that we have not done nearly enough as a society to address that, and certainly in healthcare, it has been, we're kind of slow to adopt. So I felt that way before the pandemic happened, and I certainly felt even more passionate about it after the pandemic, knowing, the isolation that happened, and certainly with, all of us that have kids, they were home and they weren't in school, and just the social fabric of the country was in such jeopardy. But again, to go back to it, I felt this way before the pandemic happened. And so when the opportunity arose for United Ag to kind of take this leadership position and offer this to everybody, it was amazing. And you said that, you were hopeful that people that had the opportunity to use this service would be, grateful for it. We didn't do it for that reason, but I'm sure if one person was helped, it's worth it. And I say that, that's kind of cliche, but there are a lot of people that were helped by this.
What you said there, where sometimes some of the decisions, like we said, we've made some decisions, and the outcomes of that decision, it's not driven by getting that gratitude back or getting that kudos back or it's not for our egos that, oh, I did this great by someone, but it is sometimes the mere fact of doing good by someone, that's enough. And that's what we were trying to do in that situation.
Yeah, I know at the time there were a number of different initiatives that we were looking at, things that we could, that we could pilot and put out, as an additional benefit. But it was pretty clear. We were lucky, if you want to call it that we had both the issue and the timing, and it just made perfect sense. There was no other direction for us to take at that point. I don't feel it was so important. And, for everything you've heard, if you're paying attention, over the last couple of years, that situation is certainly not better. The mental health situation. And so I'm just really proud that we were able to impact, if just a little, some positive impact out there.
Even if you make a very small dent and we create those trails for others to follow, that's success, right? Because you are laying out a path that somebody else can walk on later and go further than we have been. But we have actually at least taken the initiative to create these trail maps for others to follow.
Yeah, great strides start with small steps. You don't set out to have some great achievement. You set out to help.
So do you think from your role as a chairman and from United Ag, like I said, we've tripled in size and we've financially done very well. Do you think some of these things that we've talked about makes from a financial sense as being, even from what you do as your role at Rancho Guadalupe, how much of that is, because somebody listening in might say, okay, this is all well and good, but does it really, when I talk about profits, is this something I should be focusing on? What would you say to that?
Well, I guess I would say there are things that you can afford to do, and there are things you can't afford not to do. So, yeah, it's right. Some of these benefits that have been offered at no additional cost to the member or to the, whether it's the individual or the company. Yeah, does that in and of itself make financial sense? Probably not, but that's not why we do it. We do it because it's the right thing. Hopefully, we've put ourselves in the right financial position to be able to do some of these things that don't, again, in and of themselves don't make financial sense, but add to the greater good. So kind of at a loss for words because I don't know how to articulate that it was the smart financial thing to do, but it was the only thing to do.
So when I listen to you, and I've known you for a few years and listening to you, I know who AJ is, and I know part of your story from growing up, your parents and what the impact they've had on you. Is that, do you think, so what is your story, and why is your focus so much on the people aspect of things?
My connection to the industry goes way back. Started with my grandfather, being in the ag chem side of the business, of the industry. And then my dad going to work for him in the 70s. And so a lot of who I am comes from that. And when it comes to doing right by your employees and being employee-centric, I learned that from my dad. And, I don't talk a lot about this, but, it really all goes back to a story that I'd like to tell. Back in the 70s, there was quite a movement going on with organized labor in agriculture, fighting for worker rights. And the company that my dad worked for, that he, some years after this became part owner of, they had, a picket line. they had, I believe it was the UFW who had come into the Valley and was trying to organize their company. And, it was a tough time. It was a tough time for everybody. But at the end of the day, their company ended up not signing the union contract. And the reason they didn't sign the union contract is because of what the company was already doing for them. They realized that they already had a pretty good deal. And, that wasn't the case every place. And I'm not saying that I really am no commentary on the movement, but I take an enormous amount of pride in the fact that the company that my dad worked for and what they did for their employees, they were ahead. They were ahead of the curve, and that allowed them to be in a situation where they did not go union. They stayed the way they were.
And that kind of formed who you're thinking around.
It's, when I really, I can talk a lot about my experience in the 20 plus years at Rancho Guadalupe, or, working for my dad for a few years. If you want to go really back to the core of all of that, it's that story. Yeah. It's that time and how much angst there was around this movement and around worker rights and the outcome in the company my dad worked for. That goes back to the core of who I am. At the end of the day, if you're taking care of the people that work for the company, they are in turn going to try to take care of the company, which should
because they feel
success.
Part owners of the whole process, right? They're not you're not treating them as employees or just doing work. It's more as a part of a family.
In healthcare, everyone needs an advocate. And, in a lot of respects, United Ag is our collective advocate. But when it comes down to the individuals in the company in Rancho Guadalupe, and sometimes, they need our assistance to help advocate for them. And we've had many, many situations where, it's just like, hey, this is the person you need to talk to get this done. Right. Or reaching across the other side in the, the healthcare environment itself, where we have, and are proud to have some influence in the community, where we advocate for them, their specific set of circumstances, not to be, say names or specifics, but I can tell you that we don't just let the healthcare happen.
Right.
We are involved in it, and where we can impact it positively
and you take ownership.
We absolutely do.
Take on that.
And there have been times where we've done our best, and maybe the outcome wasn't what we wanted, but many, many times where that person was so grateful that we took the time to do that extra thing. And we don't do it to get the pat on the back at all. We do it because it's the right thing. Again, I know it sounds kind of like a broken record, but it's true. Sometimes I would say that we're then surprised by being thanked, because we didn't set out to be thanked. We set out to help them. And I would say that's unique, at least, in our business. We do this as often as we can. And because it's hard.
In every advocate for everything. Yeah.
And, United Ag is that for us, and has, we could say the name, but we won't say it on the podcast. But, United Ag is very good at this. And it's amazing how quickly that we can get someone at United Ag to intervene on our behalf when we need them to. And it's almost instantaneous. And you just don't have that. I mean, you have any of the larger providers out there. Good luck picking up the phone in the span of 30 minutes getting your outcome changed.
Right, and the part of that was driven by when do people come to United Ag? When people come to United Ag, when either you yourself have a health issue or somebody you love has a health issue, right? So that needs to always be we have to look at that through that lens every time. Every single time a call comes into United Ag, it could be you on the other side. And how would you like to be treated, right?
Yeah, we all, in these situations, we all come with what they call GOD, the gift of desperation.
Yep.
And I say it that way because it is truly a gift.
Yeah.
Because when we allow ourselves to be so vulnerable as to ask for help, and then to have that other person not just understand, but be able to actually step in and do something about it, it's truly a gift. We are so desperate that we reach out because we need someone to help on our behalf, and they're able to come through for us.
One of the things that I actually feel through the pandemic had happened is I think we've actually realized the importance of human connection. Because yes, we do the Zooms and we do this and whatever, but we actually crave and we need that human connection.
There's no question about it. And if, the last 2 years have taught us anything, we do crave that connection. And I honestly, I hope and I pray that we've not lost this time in our lives. Meaning, I don't want to call it the lost generation, but it is so different than what we are used to and that we've all lived through. I mean, those of us, and I count myself as one who's been on this earth long enough, this is 180 degrees different from anything we've experienced. And I really do hope that we can get back to that connection. But I don't think you can truly get to where you need to go in any situation until you see the other side of it. And I think that right now we are witnessing the other side, and we now have the proper perspective to get us back to understand how important that connection is because of what's been lost in the last couple of years.
That's true. That is so true. I'm looking at the lessons learned and what did that teach us the last 2 years, and looking at it from that perspective, it has taught us a lot.
You don't know what you have till it's gone.
Yeah.
And I think we've lost a lot in the last couple of years. But back to what we were just talking about, until you truly understand what it means to lose it, you can't truly appreciate what you had. And I think most of us, I think, are wanting to get back to that, do it in a safe way, a smart way, a reasonable way, and get back to that connection.
One of the other things, AJ, when we worked together, one of the things that I really appreciated about you was for any decisions that we made or anything we worked on, you had a very proactive approach versus a reactive approach on things. And you always made me think through the other side of things. So when I reacted based on what I knew, you said, let's put ourselves in the other person's shoes and let's understand what's driving that other person. Why is that person reacting a certain way? Maybe it's something else. Let's try to understand that. That has been something that I've learned from you.
I think you have to understand before you're understood. I could say that this is some amazing strength of mine, but truth be told is I don't like confrontation very much. And because I don't like confrontation very much, I want to understand what both sides have to say. And, so it works out that it's a strength of mine, but I come by it naturally. I'm born with this. And so I want both sides to feel like they're being heard, and that although the way forward at the end of it may be, more one-sided than the other, both sides feel like they, had a seat at the table, and they were heard. So I think that's, really where it comes from for me is, again, not some amazing strength that I have, but it's just who I am. I don't want, I want people to feel like they're being heard.
That's interesting you say that, though, because some people might see that as, when I say, oh, this person doesn't like confrontation, that might be seen as not a strength but a weakness. But you've taken something that you inherently have and you said, I'm going to use this as a strength. This is my strength. This is not something as I see as a weakness. It's more a strength for you. Yes.
And I'm trying to think of, as we're talking about this, kind of some examples, but I think I've, all throughout my life, more often than not, in these situations, both sides feel like, they've been a part of the solution. And so it's not a zero-sum game. It's not about winners and losers. It's about what's the best way forward. It's about the right thing. It's about the fair thing. It isn't about what one person wants versus the other. And to be perfectly honest, sometimes this is challenging for me. And it's, if I'm being honest, some relationships that could be stronger in my life, because for me, it's about what's the right thing? What's the fair thing? And maybe not sometimes what one person who may have felt that you should have been loyal to them wanted. It's like, well, I understand what you're saying, but there's a little piece of the other side too. So we've got to kind of talk about this. So, personally, I've come up short a little bit, in certain circumstances, because I have a unique inability to just go with the one side.
Yeah.
I almost can't do it. And so it can be challenging for me.
Somebody might say you have to blindly follow me, AJ, because I
can't do it. Now, if I'm working real hard at this skill, I'm going to take that person who's asking for blind allegiance and somehow get them to the finish line, thinking that that existed to some degree, but we still have this other component from the other side to bring across. Because again, rarely, I guess it happens, but rarely we're in any situation where one side is 100% right and the other side is 0. Like there's something that we can tie, a common thread we can pull across.
Right. And then there's something the other person who might be making or have a certain mindset, they do have some things that they say which are actually true, and you should be following those, right? So sometimes we discount. If I say, oh, this person is this way, so I'm not going to listen to anybody that person says, because I've put you in this bucket that I'm not going to believe in anything that you say, and I have AJ in this other bucket, and I trust everything that AJ says. Both sides are flawed a little bit of looking at that, because there could be some days that AJ might say something might not be right, or somebody else might say something which is true and right, and we fall in that mindset where we follow kind of based on one of the two things, or maybe what we know that person to be, right?
There's two sides to that. So the one side is, the first side, you can lose your message because of the way you say it, right? Sometimes the message gets lost because of the manner in which it's delivered.
It's said, yep.
That has the flip side too.
Right.
That you sometimes on the other side of it, well, I say the flip side, I guess it's the same point from the other side, is the other person says, this person is, unreasonable, and they're losing their temper, and they're saying these things. And so you just discount everything they say, which isn't fair, because there is something in there that we can all agree on, right? It doesn't feel that way in the moment, for sure, but that's what it is. There aren't too many situations where there isn't something that we can grab from both sides of the argument. I choose to believe that people are inherently good. We all have our moments of failure and weakness, but people are inherently good. If you are someone who thinks that people are inherently bad or inherently evil, or coming at things for their own self-interest and the cynical side, I guess,
right,
then you would approach this totally differently,
right?
And so I suppose because I feel that people are inherently good, I might open myself up, be vulnerable, expose myself at times, but I would rather be vulnerable and get hurt than feel all along that people were out for the wrong reasons or out for the wrong thing. I just can't. It's hard for me to go through the day thinking that everyone's trying to
get you,
do the wrong thing or get me, I know that can happen, but I choose not to look at life through that set of lenses.
So recently I had an experience where I feel that way. I usually trust people before somebody then does something, and I lose the trust a little bit. But I did something where I did what you were saying. I also do that a little bit, I feel, because I'm very driven by people and what drives them, what's making them anxious, and kind of help them out. But the outcome was not what I'd intended. But then I was reactive for like maybe half an hour or 1 hour. I'm like, oh, I'm not going to ever be like this ever again, right? But when you think back and you say, the next person who comes in, and I'm going to change my ways because this other person did not act the way I expected them to act, then that's not fair to everybody else who's going to come into my life later, right? Because then I'm not... And it's against who I am, and I'm going to come across as fraud, and it's going to make me anxious, and your mental health and all those issues will come up because I'm not going to be true to myself, and that's not going to be, that creates all the mental health issues that we've been talking about, really.
I think it's important that we are able to trust. And again, and yes, when you open yourself up and when you're vulnerable and you get hurt, it really hurts. And you have that moment, right, where you question, why did I do this? I should stop doing this. But having that trust in others and the enormous amount of good that can do is just so much bigger than that moment where someone takes advantage of that trust or takes advantage of your vulnerability. And so are you going to change the way that you approach this over the one when the previous 10 or 20 or 50, worked out? I think oftentimes, these situations, they say as much about us as anything, right? Because it's always about how we react. And as long as, and kind of like you just said, you kind of caught yourself, right? You said, okay, well, I'm never going to do this again. And then, you calm down and you're like, no, I'm going to keep doing this because it's the right way. So I totally understand that. We've all been there.
I just wanted to thank you, AJ, for everything that you've done at UNIDAG and your leadership. And I know what you do at Rancho Guadalupe. And just like I said, takeaways from me, which are the takeaways for the listeners, is being true to our value system, taking an approach where you're trying to understand the other side, being really listening with the intent of truly understanding, which sometimes that gets lost, and really trying to see why somebody's coming at it from a certain standpoint and understanding that and working together. I think that's success. So thank you for your leadership and thank you for your time today.
Well, thanks for having me. Just can't wait to see what's next.